Zacchaeus, mentioned in this morning's gospel, was a tax collector for the hated Roman state. Things haven't changed. The government was unpopular because of the practice of oppressive taxation in the first century. And as a tax collector, Zacchaeus was considered by his fellow Jews to be a great sinner and a man completely given over to worldly values. See, things haven't changed. He was a man who exhibited harsh realities of the world, ruthlessly competitive for wealth, exploiting others, and aggressively pursuing self-serving interests. Religion was not something that Zacchaeus had any interest in. However, there was something about Zacchaeus' conscience that prompted him to seek to see for himself in person and to hear Jesus speak. And because of this desire, God brought about a wonderful change. Zacchaeus experienced a liberation from his previous ways of thinking, the values of his life pattern of extortion and the unfair treatment of others. In today's lesson, we should notice, as in many other cases, that Jesus' encounter with Zacchaeus took place outside of the synagogue, away from the temple. Zacchaeus probably had absolutely no intention of going to the synagogue or the temple, and even if he did, the religious rules of the day would not allow him to enter. Many of our own day have a distrust for institutions, including the church. Also, distrust of those who have authority. And this pervasive attitude plagues many who have a difficult time also being part of organizations, the government, and clubs and churches. Interestingly, on the day that Jesus spoke in the city of Jericho, which happened to be a town of priests, we are told that Zacchaeus, who was a short man, went out of his way to climb a tree amidst the crowd to see Jesus. And you heard Jesus saw him, zeroed in on him, and said, "Come down, I have to go to your house." It was bad PR, because Jesus was going to sit and spend time at the home of a sinner in a town of priests. Today, you and I can easily avoid or prevent ourselves from engaging in personal face-to-face conversations, to hide, to falsify, or even remain anonymous. Consequently, it is also easier for anyone to live a double life, as many are today. And if we're honest, we'll recognize that for a very long time, you and I have been part of a way of life that has distanced ourselves from others, even our families. And many today are motivated by memories of the past and fear. St. Cyril writes in his commentary on today's lesson, quote, "Zacchaeus was a chief of tax collectors, a man entirely abandoned, given to covetousness, that is, greed. But he did not continue among their number. He sought to see Jesus. However, the crowd prevented him." St. Cyril goes on to say that it was not so much the people that had prevented him from seeing Jesus as it was what he needed to face within himself. Zacchaeus was a small man, but it wasn't only a matter of his size, but what he needed to face was his spiritual life, his conscience. And Zacchaeus could in no other way see Jesus unless he rose up from the earth. And St. Cyril says, "For in no other way can a man see Christ and believe in him except by rising up into a sycamore tree, as did Zacchaeus, turning over those foolish things which are of the earth." St. Cyril goes on to be specific, and he names sins: fornication, uncleanness, dishonesty, deception, extortion, and he goes on. The same can be true of any of us who live lives so preoccupied with our concerns about the world. The Divine Liturgy for us is a time, as we will sing, laying aside all worldly cares. And it's not for the purpose of escaping the realities of life, but for helping us in gaining a clear perspective on eternal life that begins here and now in a very dark and sinful world that we temporarily reside in. So the radical transformation in Zacchaeus' life was the love of God he experienced through Christ, personal encounter, and Jesus' personal presence and his divine love touched Zacchaeus such that he was transformed. You may recall it was Simon Peter who confessed in the Lord's presence, "Lord, I'm a sinful man, depart from me." The conversion power of God's love by Jesus' words and by his presence radically changed Zacchaeus into a new, free, and joyful man. Again, I want to point out that it was not in the synagogue or around the temple where Zacchaeus' life was changed, but by his personal encounter, by seeking, and by Jesus' personal visit to Zacchaeus' home. Much can be gained when we recognize how much we can acquire by putting an end to what wastes our time or the relationships that are not healthy in our life. There's much to do in spending time where it really matters, focusing upon those relationships with our children, our loved ones, that form and build a quality of character that lives and thrives in God's presence. The diversity of our community provides us with opportunities of learning a great deal from each other. We are not a monolithic group. And by the way, neither is God's eternal kingdom. Like Zacchaeus, there is much to be gained by encountering Christ and finding hope in new possibilities for change. Focusing upon the relationships with our children, our loved ones, that form and build a quality of character that unashamedly lives in God's presence is what matters. There are many of you who have yet to meet and get to know many who are joining our community. When does that happen? Coffee hour? I don't see it happening. It's my sincere hope that with what little time we spend on Sunday and during Lent, when we'll have 5 services a week and a Lenten meal on Wednesdays, it's my hope that you will continue to get to know each other. God's kingdom consists of a broad cross-section of people, widely diverse, and we have many opportunities of building relationships and strengthening our commitment in serving Christ and others. At this time,